I'm Lisa Lepke from ProWritingAid, and welcome to the first of not just one, not just two, but 3 sessions this week with former detective and police advisor Graham Bartlett. Graham's here, and hopefully we'll be able to pop up onto our screens in a second. There he is. Hi, Graham.
Hiya. Great
So
to be
Graham
here.
has over 30 years of experience in the field as a firearms commander and a city police chief, and he's now a crime fiction and police advisor to over 80 different crime writers, including Peter James, who we'll be talking to on Friday. And he's also a best-selling crime author in his own right. So this is great. And he's got 3 sessions. So today is crime scene management, police interviewing, and covert tactics. Wednesday is common police mistakes made by crime writers. So that could be you. And then Friday is just going to be pure Q&A. So Graham is just going to take questions from the audience for the whole hour. And on Friday, we're talking to Peter James as well, who Graham has worked with closely for many years. So those will be 2 really interesting sessions to have back to back. So Graham, thanks for being here.
No, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me. And I'm just sitting here looking at the number of participants that are bobbing up in the bottom pane there, and wondering how I'm going to deal with the questions and answers at the end. But I'm sure I will.
I know. We'll get through, I think, this session mostly. Graham's got a whole presentation for us, so he's going to take us through a ton of information. I've seen his slide deck, and it is massive. And he says that he will share it with all of you after the fact, before anybody asks. So we'll get that from him. And then we'll have time for a few questions afterwards, but Friday is going to be the day that we really put him on the hot seat, and we can ask him all of our toughest questions, right?
Great, that's fabulous. Thanks very much. And so thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us from all over the world. It's great to have the honour of meeting you all virtually. So yeah, this session is going to be around how you can get your police procedure and the culture and characters of your police officers credible in your books. I'm a retired detective, as Lisa said. I served for 30 years. Towards the end of my career, I also worked in firearms, which those of you who are not in the UK will realise, or may not know rather, that we are a predominantly unarmed force. So firearms is a bit of a specialism in itself. Public order policing, and also was in command of a city called Brighton and Hove, the policing in there. I've written 2 non-fiction books and got a fiction in the pipeline. Both of them I wrote with Peter James, who, as Lisa said, you'll meet on Friday. Death Comes Knocking and Babes in the Wood. And I now advise to around 80 crime authors and TV writers on getting the police and procedure right. And I always try and sort of express the fact that we're not looking for 100% accuracy with the crime writing, but we're actually looking for credibility and authenticity. Because if anyone wanted an accurate portrayal of policing, they would watch a documentary or read a police manual, which might put them to sleep. The other thing that I do is I'm a tutor with the Professional Writing Academy, so I run online courses for crime writers on a whole range of things, including homicide investigation, forensics, covert tactics, interviewing, firearms, and it'd be great to see some of you on some of those courses. So I'm going to. Those of you that have actually been on my courses will know that whenever I slow down, it means that I'm about to share my screen, which is always a perilous thing for me to do. So here we go. So the question, I'm going to cover covert tactics first of all. So I'm hoping you're seeing a single screen there that's got "Has technology ruined it for crime writers?" So back in the day, back in the sort of 70s, 80s, you could write crime and basically have a good old-fashioned cat and mouse chase between your lead detective and your villain. Now things have changed hugely. With all of these things, we've got telematics, we've got CCTV, we've got your cell site for using your phone. You've got, police can monitor your financial transactions. Police officers wear body-worn video. Everything is basically up there for you. So it's one of those things where you have to ask yourself, has things become too difficult? So let's talk about how the police will actually capture somebody that they're looking for covertly. So here we are. We've got, I'm going to give a scenario. I'm just going to click through this. I'm just going to give a scenario to you, which we're not going to go into a huge amount of detail on because we haven't got time, but Crime Stoppers information. So Crime Stoppers is anonymous information that comes in. I'm sure in many of your countries, you've got Crime Stoppers or something similar. So people phone in completely anonymously, you can't find out who it is. And they're saying that a serious and organised crime group, a gang, are going to move 3 Uzi submachine guns from Newcastle to Brighton to attack a rival gang. That's about 400 miles from the very northeast to the southeast of England. So it's quite some distance in UK terms, and quite a lot of road network, quite a lot of cities, etc. to go through. This is what we know about the gang. We know the gang leaders. We know that they've got 1 vehicle, and that's the registration number. They've got 1 mobile phone. We know of 1 mobile phone, and we know of 1 vehicle. It's going to happen in the next 2 days, and they're likely to employ what we call decoy or dry cleaning tactics. So they're counter surveillance tactics. They're things that, so going around roundabouts 360 degrees and heading off back the other way, indicating right but turning left, stopping at green lights, that sort of thing. So they're likely to employ that. So they're quite surveillance aware. This is what we don't know. We don't know the names of the couriers. We don't know how many vehicles they've got with them. We don't know the routes they're going to take. We don't know which of the vehicles will have weapons in them. And we don't know if they've got any intent to use the weapons. So we need to know basically all of those things, really. But predominantly, we need to know things like their phones and their financial information and where the weapons are headed. So these are the options, and I really haven't got time to go through all of these, but these are the things that we can use to help us identify who these people are, where they're going, and what their intentions are. So we've got cell site analysis, and I'm going to go into that in a bit of detail in a minute. We've got automatic number plate recognition. We've got telematics, which is the devices in modern cars now that can tell you where cars are traveling, where they have traveled. You can use them in lifetime as well in certain circumstances. Closed circuit television. We can track their financial transactions if we know one of them, and we can start putting all this together. We can track their social media, and CHIS is the UK term for covert human intelligence source. So informants, basically covert informants. We can use all of these things to identify who our gang are and where they're likely to be and when they're likely to be. And no one of these tactics is going to be the golden, the silver bullet for us to identify. We're going to have to use probably most of those, but certainly some of the key ones, the cell site, the number plate recognition, the telematics to work out what's going on. But intelligence is covert intelligence. Covert information is layered, so you kind of bring it all together to create this tapestry of information that will help you identify your offenders. So let's have a look at cell site analysis as an example of one of these. So cell site analysis is basically working out where somebody's mobile phone is at any given moment. You notice I say that you're working out where their mobile phone is because you're not necessarily knowing where they are unless you can prove that they're in possession of that phone, but it's a pretty good start. So you can use cell site analysis. You can find out where people's phones are in lifetime in certain circumstances and historically. So somebody could check on my phone now and find out within a reasonable degree of accuracy roughly where I am, but and also where I'm not. I mean it's pretty good for excluding people from things as well, although that's used as a tactic by criminals who'll have people wander off with their own mobile phones. And you can use it historically, so you can say, okay, well, over the last month, where has that phone been? Where have they gone? And then you kind of use other information like crimes that have occurred or information about their vehicles, and we'll talk about that in a minute, from automatic number plate recognition, to layer all that on top. So you've got a picture developing. It's not precise, and I'll show you why it's not precise in a moment. So you couldn't say that the person was in Walmart in a particular city at a particular time, but you could certainly say they were in that vicinity. And I'll show you why that's the case in a minute. Of course, it can work when you make a call, but it doesn't need to. You don't need to be making a call as long as your phone is on, and your phone. The way your phone works is that it's always sending signals to signal masts, and this is what a cell site is. It's a signal mast, and the range around that signal mast. So my phone at the moment will be sending messages, talking to, pinging off probably 3 signal masts close to where I am. And the reason it's doing is it's trying to find the strongest signal, so that if I decide that I want to make a call or somebody wants to call me, then the phone will know which signal to talk to. But all the time it's pinging, it's creating a Venn diagram which can kind of say, well, you know, if it's pinging at this strength off that mast, or from that strength off the other mast, then we can start to work out where that phone might be at this particular time. Location services don't need to be on for that. So again, this is purely on the phone data. I'm not talking here about sort of anything more precise than that. This is purely on the phone, the phone call mechanism. So in a phone, you've got, this is the IMEI number I'm going to talk about now. So you've got your phone number, and your phone number is determined by your SIM card. So if you want to know where I am, then you can search my phone number, and the return I will get will not only say, you know, basically where, you know, roughly where I am and calls I've made, but it will also give what's called the IMEI number of the phone that's working with. So if you can imagine, the IMEI number identifies the handset itself, and the phone number is just identifying the SIM card. So you put the two together and you can say, well, Graham Bartlett is using this number with that particular handset. So I've got that information. I decide, well, I'm going to throw away my SIM card and I'm going to get another SIM card, another phone number, because I think the police are onto me. So then the police can then say, well, okay, well, you know, we don't think he's got that phone number anymore. Let's check, see where his IMEI number is being used, and see what number it's being used with. And all of a sudden they found out my new phone number. So the IMEI number is really important. You know, if you throw away the SIM card, it doesn't mean that you can't be tracked. This is why criminals use burner phones. They'll actually destroy the phone. They use the phone once, destroy it, and move on, because they know that destroying the SIM card isn't enough. You can use cell site analysis of associates, so friends of friends, as I put there. So you can start to sort of work out where other people are in relation to your target, and who's closest to them. So, you know, our gang that are coming down with the submachine guns, you can start to sort of say, well, actually, you know, the last couple of weeks, they've been very close to each other at key times, these 3 people. So they might well be the other people in this gang that we're looking for. And you can start to develop intelligence like that. So this is roughly how this works then. So there we got the island of Manhattan there, and each of these blue dots is a cell mast. This is a really sort of basic depiction of it. So this is a cell mast there over in New Jersey. You've got a cell mast there in Brooklyn. You've got a cell mast there in Lower Manhattan. Now, you know, there will be lots more cell masts. This is just an illustration of how it works. So my phone, which is here, is pinging off all of these cell masts at different times, and you can start to then work out the strength of them and which mast it prefers, where in this kind of Venn diagram I'm likely to be. So if I only had this particular mast, if I only knew that mast, then I'd be somewhere in there. If it's pinging equally off all 3 of those, then it's a pretty good bet I'm in that little zone there. But if you think about, those of you that know Manhattan, if you think about that area there, clearly there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of offices, buildings, places that I could be in there. But you can pretty much say that if I've got that phone with me, I'm not I'm not up in Midtown. I'm not in Long Island City. I'm not over here. You know, you're starting to work out where I am, and that's how cell site works. It's really useful. So when you're writing, you're writing crime, and your main character is trying to locate the suspect. You know, you use the phones, you use the phone data, use the information that you can get from that to try and narrow it down. You don't need to always have eyes on to be able to follow a person. You can do it using the technology, and it is a very much a go-to tactic in most countries these days. So think about how your main character can use the phone, and equally how your suspect can evade the police by not using the phone. As I say, you know, it's a tactic now that criminals will give their phones to other people and send them, you know, send them 20 miles away to try and prove that they weren't in the place where the armed robbery happened, or whatever it is that you're investigating. Okay, I'm going to talk about automatic number plate recognition. So this is a technical system. I'm going to talk a little bit UK at the moment, but it will be in other countries as well. But the technology is basically static or mobile cameras that are basically taking photographs of registration plates, license plates of cars that are coming into their zone. So in the UK, on the main roads, there are a number of fixed ANPR cameras that are constantly taking photos of the number plates of all the cars passing through, and those cameras tend to be front facing, so you're picking up the front of the cars on those, and they're literally just storing them, and you know, for future use. You also have them on in police cars. So a lot of police cars have them, and likewise they will pick up vehicles coming towards them, or if they're following a car, it'll pick up the car for the registration number of that car. So it's just all about camera angle. It doesn't really matter whether it's front or back plate. It's all about the camera angle. Now you can use this live or historic. So if I'm looking for, if I know we had a vehicle number on that little scenario that I put up a little while ago, if I had that as as my piece of intelligence, I would put a marker on what we call the police national computer to say that vehicle is of interest to me, and I want to be notified of any sightings or ANPR activations. So I would then be told every time that car was picked up on ANPR. So if I started to find out that car was moving into Newcastle, which is where the submachine guns are going to come from, if you remember, then I'm starting to think, hang on a minute, you know, the job could be on now. So we might have something here. But I would have that information coming to me all the time. I would also be able to use it historically. So I would be able to say, a bit like the phones, where was that car? What cameras was that car pinging? Over the last week, you know, where were they? What were the movements? And I'll talk to you a bit about convoy analysis in a minute, because that's fascinating, and this is how we start to build up, vehicles that we're aware of that are together in this particular gang. So the cameras produce still images, and that's quite often a mistake that I see when I'm reviewing manuscripts for crime writers or answering questions, is that some people think that it's a CCTV, it's a moving image, it's a still image. So you get a snapshot of the front of the car, you're obviously, depending on the direction of travel, you may, because of the camera angle, you may pick up the front seat passengers. You might get an image of them. Just the camera's focused on the number plate, but you might well get the front seat passenger. So what you have then is you've then got another piece of intelligence. So if, for example, our car that we're looking for, we think that it's going to be two men driving it, and we get an ANPR shot of it, and we think, well, hang on a minute, there's a woman driving and a child in the passenger seat. Not only does that change our information, it also changes our risk assessment if you've got a child in there. So it's not designed to pick up particularly good images of people, but it is designed to pick up it does pick up the number, and sometimes you get the passengers as well. It's not 100% reliable. You know, if number plates are dirty or they are obscured deliberately in some way, it won't pick that up. But it will pick up a number plate that you can kind of read in normal circumstances. It doesn't have to be kind of gleaming white. Convoy analysis I'm going to come on to in a minute, so I'll leave that one for the moment. And the other one is traffic enforcement cameras. So cameras on red lights, on traffic junctions. You know, if somebody's going through those or somebody's speeding, all of that information is available as well. So it's quite often you'll pick up if you've got an armed robbery or a drug steal gone down or a murder. One of the first things that you should do as a detective is just scope whether or not there's any traffic enforcement cameras in the area, because you can bet if someone's driving away, they're not going to be stopping at red lights or sticking to the speed limit, and they might have triggered one of those cameras, and that might give you a line of inquiry on that. So this is what this is the city of Bath, which is in the southwest of England, and this is what the ANPR cameras look like here. So this is the centre of Bath here, and you can see you've got a series of cameras that I don't know what the colours denote, but you've got a series of cameras around the city centre. You then got some more on the periphery, and then you've got some on the major roads in and out. So you then know that if somebody's going to do something in the middle of Bath, they've got to have pretty good local knowledge to be able to find their way out of the city without being caught. And these cameras, the static cameras, are just grey cameras stuck on bridges and lampposts, and people drive past them without a moment's notice. Okay, so let's this is what an ANPR camera image looks like. So this one here, you can see what I mean there. You can just see the registration number there, and you can make out that there's a man driving, and it looks like the passenger seat is empty. But it will pick up, not only will it pick up cars that you're looking for, but it will also trigger things from unpaid traffic tickets right the way through to suspected terrorists, and that they will trigger proactively. So in police control rooms, you get this beep 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 all the time of cars going through, and they're graded so that, you know, when the suspected terrorist is coming through, then somebody does something about it. But it's quite worrying when you sit in a control room and you listen to all these beeps and you realise how many uninsured cars there are on the road. Stolen cars and suspected terrorists tend to get some attention, others don't. So let's have a look at convoy analysis then. This is the last point on covert tactics. So we've got a number of cars here. They're all hitting the camera in Newcastle. As I said, it's about 400 miles, major roads coming down, lots of different ways of getting from Newcastle to Brighton. So you've got 400 cars. We've got one car that we know the registration number of. So we put that in and we say, okay, where's that car? And then we track that car. We track that car. What other cameras has that car triggered in a journey? So we're starting to then get an idea of the route that car's taken. We then set a parameter around, okay, well, if that car left at 10 a.m, let's have a look at all cars that left Newcastle between 9:30 and 10:30. That's going to be a huge number. So okay, we've got that as a data set. So now let's take the next stage in the journey. So you might choose someone on the motorway 50 miles south of there. Okay, so where's our car now? Now, which of the cars that that left Newcastle at the same time of our car are still basically traveling the same direction as our known car? And you start to get a smaller number, and you do that several times throughout our known car's journey. And what you're doing is you're basically you end up with a funnel. So because of what I know about the way people travel around the UK, or what I infer about the way people travel around the UK, there won't be many people leaving Newcastle at 10 o'clock this morning that end up in Brighton at 3 o'clock this afternoon or 4 o'clock this afternoon. And if there are, they won't have traveled the same route necessarily. They might have stopped at different times. So by using ANPR as a predictive tool, you can start to identify maybe 3 or 4 other cars that may well be part of the same gang as the car that we're looking for, and that's how you identify convoys. Of course, on top of that, I said at the beginning that you layer the you layer the information, so you do the work on their phones as well, and you're ticking their phones, and eventually you're starting to get some firmer intelligence around that. Okay, I'm just gonna stop sharing now for a minute, and then move. So we're gonna talk now about crime scene management. So that's it on sort of covert. There's lots of other things, and I do run a course on that with the Professional Writing Academy. So if any of you want to come onto that course, that would be great to see you there. We cover a lot more detail. We talk about how the police actually deploy covertly and some of the things that they're able to do. So it's quite a popular course. So let's talk about crime scene management first of all. So what I'm going to cover here is the initial response to a murder. So let's think about a murder, and let's think about what happens when we send officers to the scene. We send officers and they confirm that it's a murder. What's the first thing that they have to do? What are their first considerations? So back to screen sharing, which you can tell because I've slowed down talking. So there we go. So first of all, we have to determine what is a scene. Now, the reason we have to determine what a scene is because a scene is probably best described as something which will contain or may contain unique forensic evidence. So when we talk about a crime scene, sometimes we just talk about where the incident actually happened. Did it happen, you know, in this front room or this house or on, you know, outside this restaurant or whatever it is? But a scene is far more complex than that. Scenes are far more complex. So here we've got offence location, pretty much a given. The victim, so the victim is a scene in themselves, and I'll explain why we have to break them up this way. Some witnesses will be a scene. Suspects, routes to and from the scene, weapons will be scenes. Suspects' home address or other premises associated with them or the offence, vehicles, deposition or dump sites. So, you know, it might be that the murders happen one place and the body's been moved somewhere else, and that's called a deposition or a dump site. Now, the reason that we have to break them up like that is because if we're going to forensically examine all of those places, we effectively need to have each of those scenes protected in some way or another, and I'll go into that in a second. And we also need to ensure, as far as we possibly can, and sometimes it's not possible, so you need to have other precautions in, that that you have different forensic officers, different scenes of crime officers on each scene, because what you can't have is you can't have a scenes of crime officer working away at the offence location and then being asked to go and recover the clothing or take swabs from the suspect when they're wearing the same forensic gear and without any precautions at all, because any forensics you then find on the suspect that links them to the location basically are undermined and not worth the paper they're written on. So this is why that definition of scenes is so important in any homicide investigation. But this is the priority of any police officer at a scene of a crime. So I quite often get asked, you've got somebody's been shot in a front room of a house. You can see that there's blood all over the place. There's glass all over the place. There's DNA all over the place. What do? Do you go in and tend to the person that's been shot, or do you stand back and wait for the forensics to come in? And every time, preservation of life comes in first. So the first thing an officer will do, and they'll do it as carefully as possible, but they're not going to hang around, is they will get into that scene and check whether or not that the person who's been shot is alive, and if they are alive, that they will try and basically keep them alive, first aid, call paramedics, whatever it might be. If they are, if they're certain that the person has died, and that different places have different ways of doing that, there's it's basically, it's called recognition of life extinct. Even in the UK, some areas allow police officers to do that, others call out paramedics to do that, or doctors to do that. But once it's obvious that the person has died, everybody leaves the scene and secures it, and nobody goes back in there at all until it's got some proper crime scene protocols around it, so that we're not taking stuff in and out. And I'm coming on to that in a minute. The final three boxes there around identification, evidence, victim, and suspects are basically the fast track priorities then after that. But preservation of life always trumps everything else. So why does it matter? Well, if you allow people to traipse in and out of the scene, you can take or deposit any of the following things in there. You can deposit your fingerprints in there. You might touch something. You might smudge a fingerprint that's already there. You might leave some DNA there. You might take some DNA. DNA analysis is so sensitive now that you can literally sort of lean up against something, and you've deposited DNA on it, and you've also taken DNA from it. If there's DNA, so if somebody's touched it and then you lean against it, you've taken their DNA on your clothing. That's called secondary or even tertiary transfer. That can go into fibers, footwear marks. You might destroy. You might put fibers and footwear marks in there. Countless times I've known crime scenes where somebody's got very excited about a boot mark, and they found out that it's the first police officer on the scene who was in there for good reason, but because they were trying to save a life. But you minimize this as far as possible. So you need to keep the integrity of the scene. So you secure the scene. So securing the scene can be in many different ways. So using tape, that's the obvious one. That's the first one, really. You tape off the scene. We've seen this all over the place. Quite often you'll find that there are on a murder that you'll have two cordons. You'll have an outer cordon, which is in the UK normally taped off with blue and white tape, and then an inner cordon, which is kind of the very focus of where it's happened. So the outer cordon might include the whole house, or even maybe a row of houses, the gardens, the entrances to and fro. But the inner cordon might be, the lounge where it happened, or something like that. So that's red and white tape. You deploy officers to guard the scene, and making sure that the officers only attend one scene, because again, there's a possibility of secondary and tertiary transfer if they're booking in people to different scenes. So you try and keep them in one scene. I used to, one of the things I used to do when in my latter days in the police, I had my police uniform denoted my rank, which was, say this for the point of the story, not for anything else, was quite a senior rank. So I would go to crime scenes in my uniform, and they would very often, the most junior police constable would be there guarding the scene, and I would engage him or her in conversation, and then in my full uniform, much more senior than them, say, right, okay, I'm going to go look in the scene now. And they would, the ones that passed the test would say, no, hang on, why do you need to go in there? But however senior I was, why do you need to go in there? You don't, I need you to look. If what's your reason for going in there? The ones that failed the test were overawed by the rank and let me do it, and I shouldn't have been doing it. And I never actually went in there. I always stopped as my foot was about to go over the tape, because it's a really important job that those officers don't let people in the scene. So in your books, let's not have people just wandering into the scenes for the sake of it, or if they are, let's have a consequence for that later on in the story. Let's show their stupidity up for them in the story. Vehicles as barriers to prevent entry is obviously one that we can use. Roadblocks, temporary fencing, tents, very often outside scenes. If you've got an outside scene in your books, try and remember that the elements will obviously wash away or destroy a lot of evidence. So for that and for privacy, the police will erect a small tent over, or a large tent if it needs to be, over the area concerned. This is what a scene guard looks like in the UK. We've got obviously an officer there, police and community support officer, who's trying to engage a very bored-looking police constable there in conversation, but they're guarding that scene there. And then the crime scene log. There is now an addition to these, but this is a sort of fairly standard one. This is what those officers will be putting on. So you know, if I did go in, if I had a good reason to go in there, which I never did have, name and title, initials. So basically Chief Superintendent Bartlett. I would initial that. Sussex Police. Time I went in, time they went out. Reason for entering, really important. And there's another couple of boxes now, is that are my fingerprints and DNA on the elimination database. So if they find that I've been touching everything and leaving my DNA all over the place, they can find it out pretty quickly. And never allow anyone to enter your crime scene unless they're dressed like that. I don't know if there's any TV writers on there, but quite often we get pictures of, we see people, you know, the lead detective wearing suits and maybe a pair of gloves if you're lucky, and everyone else wearing that. Everybody needs to be dressed like that. DNA is ubiquitous these days, and they will literally, you will shed DNA from any bare bit of skin at all. So that's why they are minimising their exposure. I'm going to skip that slide. So basic do's and don'ts when if you're writing, do ensure that the scene is secure as soon as it's safe. Cover the entry points. So a scene must always start as wide as you possibly can. You can always contract it later, but you can't. If you've got a crime scene, you can't think, oh, it's only this room, and then decide to bring in the whole house. You need to start the house and bring it in, because otherwise the area that wasn't in the crime scene in the early hours has immediately become contaminated. Don't allow anything to be removed unless it's for arrest or hospital attention. This is before the forensic officers turn up. So nothing goes out of there unless you're arresting them or they're going off to hospital. You leave everything as it is. Don't allow any interference before the scene crime officers arrive, and don't make any exceptions to scene security. That's my story about me trying to wangle my way into a scene. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing again just to give you a break from looking at the slides. Okay, so I'm going to talk about investigative interviewing now. So now some of this is quite UK specific because the UK have some unusual ways of interviewing, but I think it's useful for anybody really to sort of understand about how interviews are and are not conducted. Particularly if you're tempted to write the good cop, bad cop scenario, hopefully by the end of these few slides, you'll be, you won't want to do that anymore. The first principle is that interviewing is a specialism carried out by trained officers. Those trained officers are usually in this country detective constables or detective sergeants. They're not the detective chief inspector. They're not the senior officers involved. So because basically they're not the ones that are trained to do it. So interviewing is a specialism carried out by trained officers, as I said, detective constables, detective sergeants at a push. All the interviews are carried out in police stations for suspects, for people that are arrested. They're always carried out in police stations unless there's a really, really good reason for that not to happen, and we can discuss that if you want to. They're all carried out under caution. We call it caution in the UK. In the US, they're called Miranda rights. So basically, people have to be read their rights before they're cautioned, and there is a specific point in time when they have to be read their rights. And your own countries may differ on that, but in the UK, it's when the police have got reasonable grounds to suspect they've committed the offence. That's when they have to caution them. In this country, and I know this differs across the world, in this country, solicitors are very much present in interviews. So everyone who is interviewed is entitled to have their solicitor present. And if they want a solicitor present, an interview can't go ahead unless there's specific reasons around saving life or recovering high value property or similar things, for interviews to go ahead without the solicitor present. And the solicitors have to be given what we call pre-interview disclosure. So what that means is you have to give them the bones of the case, basically, why this person has been arrested for this particular offence. You don't tell them everything. You certainly not expect that. They don't expect to be told everything, but you have to give them enough so that they can then take instructions from the person that's in custody. So there's always a bit of a decision to make about what you're going to tell the solicitor. So you may want in your stories to give your solicitor a lot of information, give them a good deal of information, or you might want to keep it you might want to keep it fairly sort of brief and bland. And for offences of the nature that you're writing, assuming that you're not writing the Great British or the Great American shop theft, they will always be video recorded. So there's always a video recording made of those. Again, in the UK, maybe different elsewhere, if you've got a young person or somebody that's got a mental health need or is vulnerable in some way, who doesn't speak English as their first language and wants a solicitor, you could easily have 6 people in the interview room. So you have your 2 interviewing officers, you have the person you're interviewing, you have the solicitor, someone called an appropriate adult, and their interpreter. And it can get quite crowded and quite complicated with all those people wanting to have a bit of a say in the interview. So it's really important that your officers, when you're writing these, if you are going, I would try and avoid having them, or if you do have them, try and keep them off the page as much as you can. But your officers must be assertive in those interviews, and not fall into the trap of being being subservient to the solicitors, for example. In the UK, there's a kind of general rule around no threats, no promises, no lies. So you can't threaten a suspect if they don't make an admission, you're gonna lock them up for another 24 hours, or we're going to go around and search your mum's house or whatever. You can't make threat. That's coercion. You can't make promises to them. So you can't say, if you admit this offence, we will bail you, or if you admit this offence, you'll get a lighter sentence, because that is also coercion. And you can't lie to them either. So you can't say, we've got your fingerprints on the gun. If you haven't got the fingerprints on the gun, you can't say, you were seen by a particular person if they weren't seen by a particular person. But what you can do is you can ask them a question, and you can say, we're examining the gun for fingerprints at the moment. What are you going to say if we find yours on there? What are we going to say when we start talking to people in the neighbourhood and they tell us that you were around there? So you can't lie to them, but you can ask them hypothetical questions. So I'm going to put a graphic up now for this one, because interviews generally come in 3 phases, and I think for the purposes of your writing, this is worth hanging on to this one. So this is what we call the peace interview model, which is, and you'll get these slides so you can see this. So you can see that's an acronym: planning and preparation, engage and explain, account, check, clarification and challenge, closure and evaluation. That's the model, the broad model that the police work to interview people. For your sakes, I would focus on 3 phases of interview, and probably more on the final phase. So the first phase is what we call the first account phase. So that's the kind of very open question. I'll just take that slide off now. Very open question: where were you? What did you do? Where does the who can verify where you were? Very open question. Very low threat. We want you to tell us what went on. We want you to tell us if you didn't do this. You tell us what you wanted. Bearing in mind that to all these questions, by the way, they might say no comment and answer no questions whatsoever. very open questions. That's the first account stage. The second account stage is the second stage is the clarification stage. Now this is where you kind of have a hybrid of closed and open questions. So you said that you got the bus home from work. What bus was it that you got? Oh, okay. So it was that bus. Okay, who else was on the bus? How did you pay to get on the bus? So you're starting then to tie them down to a particular narrative that they've offered up. And you're doing that, you might be doing that in the knowledge that you've got a bank of evidence behind you that is actually going to blow their account out of the water. So you're notionally accepting their story, but you're getting them to wed themselves to it, because it's all leading in to the final stage, which is the challenge stage. And that's the one where I think you probably want to focus more, because that's where the drama is. So what you've done is you've allowed them to set their own track. You've got them given this nice free-flowing account. Isn't this, oh, this is easy. I've only got to tell the police this and I'll be walking out the door. And then, the police are asking me a few questions. I don't know all the answers to them, but I'm not quite sure. And then at the challenge stage, that's when you bring in the forensic evidence. You bring in the fact that they weren't on the bus CCTV because you've checked it. You're bringing in the fact that when they said they were watching a particular football match on television that night, actually that football match was postponed and it wasn't on. And you're bringing in all of that, and you watch them crumble in front of you. And they may never admit it, but it's so powerful to write and to watch if you're writing TV, to focus in on that final stage where it's all coming on top. Okay, so that is the presentation side of today. I think we've got another 10 minutes, and I'm not sure how many questions we got or how on earth we're going to do it. And I've because I can't multitask.
You've only got 75 questions.
All right. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm not going to have time for 75 questions. So
no. Let's go through. I'll try and choose ones that will be sort of quicker, easier answers, and then ones that are too specifically in depth on someone's actual novel. We might skip over some of those ones. So based on what you've most recently been talking about, I'll start at the end. Audrey wants to know about interviewing witnesses at the scene. Do you interview witnesses at the scene, or does everybody have to go back to the station?
So what you'll do at the scene, you'll get a very, very quick account from them. So if you've got somebody at the scene, you go, particularly if it's a person that's phoned, you'll get a very quick account. Okay, what did you see? Where were you? What happened? Who else was here? And then what you would do with somebody like that, you would take them back to the police station. And if they actually saw the crime or saw somebody running away, they'd be categorized as a significant witness, and we would interview them on video with specialist trained interviewers, because the detail of what they might say might be absolutely crucial. You can get the you can interview witnesses at home just as easy as at the police station. Sometimes it's a tactic to interview them at a police station. I say to some writers, if you've got somebody that you want to put under a bit of pressure, but you're not going to arrest them, let's get them on your own territory. Let's get them in the police station. But if you're just talking to somebody, then interview them at home. Some people respond better to that.
Okay, great. There's quite a few people who are asking how different interviewing rules are in the US compared to here. Several people think that police in the US are allowed to lie and do a bit more pushing around of people. What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I believe they are. I don't know. And of course, bear in mind, when we talk about the US, we're talking about every state in the US having their own judicial system and judicial processes. There's a really good website, a really good Facebook group that people can join called Cops and Writers, which a lot of these questions come up in that, because you get cops working in different states. So if you say, I've got this, I'm basing this my story in California, and I want this to happen, how can it happen? And you'll get a very, very specific response relating to that particular state. So it's quite difficult to talk about. I don't know it because I'm from the UK, but also it's very difficult to talk about the US and other places in one.
Okay, that's good to know. It's a good reference for everyone. There's a few people who have asked about crime scenes and how long they remain crime scenes, and how long a person, when they could expect to access them again.
Okay, so So you've got a sort of standard size house. So a house with a lounge, dining room, kitchen, 3 bedrooms, bathroom, downstairs toilet, something like that, and all of that house is potentially the crime scene. That crime scene will probably remain as a crime scene for 10 days to 2 weeks. That's how long it would take for the scenes of crime officers to go through it methodically, making sure that they've searched every single part of it and recorded and recovered everything that they have. And so 10 days to 2 weeks at the outside, and at the end of it, it's not always a very nice place, because there's been chemicals all over the place and there's fingerprints. Certainly in the UK, people are given details of crime scene cleanup companies, and generally they can recover that on their house insurance, or in certain circumstances the police will pay, and they'll always say where there's been chemicals used for health and safety reasons.
Interesting. Resham wants to know specifically how long the body will be there before it's taken for an autopsy.
So the body would normally stay there. It's more about what has to happen to the body there. So obviously the first police will turn up, and then the detectives will turn up, and then the scenes of crime officers, the forensic officers will turn up, the CSIs will turn up, and sometimes, and this is the UK, sometimes the pathologist will turn up. I think in the States, when I'm saying pathologist, think coroner. But sometimes the pathologist will turn up because they want to see the body in situ. But you can probably expect the body to be there probably for 2 to 3 hours after the first detective has arrived, as a minimum. And then the body would then be, the hands, the head, and the feet would all be securely bagged, and the body would then be put into a clean and unused body bag, which then itself would become an exhibit, because there might be DNA that's put in. So probably 2 to 3 hours before it's off to the mortuary.
Okay, good. I've got a couple of interview questions. Jean wants to know if you do the piece process in one interview or over the course of several interviews.
No, it tends to be over. That's a really good question. It tends to be over several interviews, and so it won't. I distilled it down into three phases. It wouldn't necessarily be, you do it over 5 for each of those letters. You wouldn't say, okay, we've reached the end of P now, we move on. A lot will depend on the complexity, and a lot will depend on the how much evidence, and also how well the your suspect is responding. What the police tend to do they will leave what they call a bedtime story. So if they've got they've got a sort of key bit of evidence to drop, then they will give that to them at the very last thing at night, and then interview them the following morning just to play on their mind. So it's they call it a bedtime story. So okay, so we're just about to go back and just check on the forensic results that we think are going to really kind of put this one way or the other. See you in the morning, and that
just love that.
Adverts, yeah.
I love it. Okay, a couple questions about underage suspects. Can you interview kids that are under 18, or what's the cutoff, and do they need to have some sort of adult with them?
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can. In the UK, the cutoff for criminal responsibility is 10. So anyone under the age of 10, it can't commit a crime. It's different in different parts of the world, so you need to check that is wherever you are. And there always has to be what we call an appropriate adult with them when they're being interviewed. Now, that appropriate adult ideally should be a parent or guardian or carer, but it can also be somebody from social services, and there are even sort of there are organisations that provide appropriate adults to police stations for that very purpose. But they always have to have an adult. You can't interview them without one.
Good. Going back a little bit more to crime scene, there's an interesting question here from Matthew. What happens when a detective, scene tech, or someone else damages or contaminates the crime scene through negligence? Is there a punishment or some sort of consequence for that?
It all depends on the level of negligence and the impact. I mean, certainly they would be fined a huge number of cakes for their offices. That's the general. punishment purposes, informally, police officers, I think, around the world are finding cakes. So donuts and things would have to be provided. Yeah, I mean, if they're, you know, if they're negligent and they've messed up something, then, you know, if they could end up losing their job. You know, if it's you know, if they've been so stupid and worked outside their training, then they could end up losing their job. It all depends. I mean, just an example is people at a crime scene, you always walk on stepping plates, which are kind of they're generally plastic or metal little platforms, and they just stop you sort of walking on evidence. And people do fall off those. You know, they do stumble off those, and you know, obviously it's very embarrassing when they do that. But that's a kind of accident that happened. But the really important thing is if they ever do anything like that, if they ever damage a crime scene or, you know, destroy the integrity, they must declare it at the time. Then, you know, it's far worse to try and cover it up than actually do it, because at least you can then kind of start recovering what might have happened if you lie about it, or then the only time it will come out is court.
Okay, one last question, because we're officially out of time and there's still 93 questions left. But there's a few questions about interviewing people who are injured. What are the rules about interviewing them at crime scenes or in the hospital? Do you have to wait until they're better?
If they're suspects, then you shouldn't interview them in the hospital. But if they're victims, you can interview them in the hospital, subject to the doctor saying it's okay. You can interview the crime scenes. Obviously, it depends on the severity of the injury, but you know, it's usually the urgent questions you need to get through. You know, who did this to you? You know, were they armed? Are they dangerous? Where are they gone? What's it all about? Those sorts of things. And then the deeper questioning would come later.
Okay, great. And I think we have to end it there. But we've got Graham back tomorrow for his other session, which is common police mistakes made by crime writers. And I feel like we're watching Line of Duty in the UK, and I'm going to be I was watching an interview last night, and as you were talking, I was thinking, oh, I see exactly what they did in that interview. That was them starting wide and narrowing.
I'm going to save my Line of Duty stories for tomorrow. There you go. There's a bedtime story for you all. And I notice there are a lot of questions. I'm doing a question and answers on Friday. But also my website, policeadvisor with an or.co.uk, you can contact me through there. And if you want any support with your writing, just visit me on that site, and you'll see how to contact me, and I can either, you know, answer questions on your works in progress, manuscript reviews, do whatever. That's what I do for a living now. So.
Great. You can see everyone in the chat saying that they loved it. There's so much. I feel like there's a lot of information there, and everyone's going to go back and go through all of your slides again once we've got them up on the site. So we'll put them up on the Crime Week hub within the next couple hours or tomorrow at the latest, and then you can all go back and dig in and figure out how to add it into your stories moving forward. Okay, Graham. Well, we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.